Morning, everyone. Great that you're able to join us this morning. My name is Jeff Spence from Investing Northern Ireland's Food and Drink Division. I hope you enjoyed our 4 presentations this morning, and indeed great presentations following on from a great week on Monday and Wednesday as well. So some key issues, some big questions answered, and probably a few new questions that we maybe need to take away some of the information and think about. I'm joined now by our 4 presenters. So can I just ask if you have any questions to get them in on the chat box in the bottom right hand corner, but we have several questions in from registration, so I'm going to jump straight into those. Michaela, I'm going to stick with you. Thanks very much for your presentation on Finnebrook. Just an amazing story of growth and of innovation. We've heard a lot this week about the competing priorities in terms of the quest for health and the challenges of people making the right choice. And you've really helped the consumer within that category. Michaela, can I ask you, with that in mind, what is the consumer profile for Naked Bacon? And does it differ from the typical bacon consumer?
Thanks, Jeff. It's an interesting question, actually. I think we would consider our Naked Bacon consumers as they would consider themselves, really as discerning foodies, those that are not only just aware of what they eat and the impact on their health and well-being, but increasingly so on the environment. So, I mean, to that end, in comparison to own label, which is a huge part of the market, they have a slightly higher proportion of a higher socio-demographic group, so A, B, C ones. And actually, interestingly, we've seen this shift over time. And the reason for that is, as we've kind of grown the brand and looked at where we may be under trade, we recently introduced what we would refer to as our mid-tier packs into the likes of Mainland, Waitrose and Sainsbury's. And that's slightly opening up that demographic to be more accessible to I guess, the more standard bacon consumer. And that started to help change the perception of affordability of having the benefits of a nitrite-free bacon. In fact, the products that I refer to there, what we call our mid-tier, have recently launched into Tesco's in Northern Ireland. And really, the rates of sale are surpassing our expectation, and in that case, doing more than our initial products. So it's really great to see that we're enabling that to be accessible to more consumers. And I think, I said in my presentation, we're always looking to do the right thing by the consumer and the planet, because it really is what matters to us and what drives us on a day-to-day basis. So over time, we'll look for new ways to better engage with, I guess, the family demographic, where we typically undertrade, whether that be through new products or different uses, both in meat and meat-free arenas. And there's a big part about that around additional education as to the dangers of nitrites on health in relation to bowel cancer, but also the transparency of information. And that's particularly important, when we think around, I guess, what the true environmental cost of the food that we eat is. So we will expect our brand profile to start shifting the more we kind of enter into plant-based as well. With younger kind of pre-families, young professionals who really engage with that area too. So it's a bit of a moving feast, I guess, is the answer to the question.
Right. I mean, Finnebrook has really been a game changer. It's turned this Naked Bacon, has really turned this category on its head. Is it a case that consumers are switching away from the traditional bacon to your brand, or is Naked Bacon attracting significant new shoppers to the bacon category?
Again, really not a great question, and I think one that we're very conscious of. I think what we can see using the likes of Kantar data, looking at gains and loss analysis, is when we initially launched, or when we launched Naked Bacon into a new retailer or a new outlet, about 2/3 of that sale is incremental to the category, which is a really, really great stat to have. And how that kind of 2/3 splits down is 1/2 of that, or 1/3 of it, is, I guess, existing bacon consumers adding Naked to what they would consider their normal bacon purchase, so they're giving it a try. And the other 1/3 are those consumers that are new to the category. It's more than likely that they used to buy bacon have become, you know, with a huge amount of press around the dangers of processed meats through the World Health Organization, that they've actually lapsed and stopped buying. And that's particularly why we I guess, appeal to that older demographic who are more concerned with their health. So it's really, really encouraging to see that we're bringing home the bacon, if you like, excuse the pun. And it's a great message for a brand as well. You know, increasing penetration levels, as most of us know, it's the most difficult thing to impact in terms of category growth. So it's great for our brand, really. The other really interesting thing that we see is actually when we launch new products. So I gave you the example of mid-tier, but when we launch new products like lardons or medallions, as an example, or streaky bacon, you know, people have very defined likes. So in terms with different likes and different usages, we see that doesn't steal from our own brand that we've currently got, or again, you know, to the same extent for the other products in the category, it actually adds incremental sales as well. So it's really about consumer choice and preference, whether that be smoked or unsmoked, for breakfast, for an ingredient, you know, or simply as a healthier or more price-conscious offering.
Lovely, thanks, Michaela. Question in here for Camden. So Lucas, definitely coming to you now. A whole new approach that we've seen from Finnebrook, and very daunting for companies to even start to take on a project like that. Could you outline what support and tools are available from Camden BRI to help companies to reformulate products and to develop new healthy products?
Thank you, Jeff, for the question. Yeah, there's a range of tools or support available from Camden, really. First of all, we have a product innovation team, which is really just there only to support companies with their reformulation projects. They can act in different ways to support our clients or other companies. One thing we can do, for example, is to fully take on the product development work for you, which then would be carried out by one of our experienced technologies in our facilities at Camden BRI. If this is done, it should never be really considered like a full handover. We like to work very closely together with our clients and therefore provide regular updates and just keep a regular exchange with our clients going that just allows the client to remain in control of the product development process, while the majority of the work, the development work, would be done by us in-house. Another way in which we can help companies with this is that we can offer access to pilot plant equipment that can be, for example, used then by companies to trial a new processing method, while at the same time getting some assistance with the operation before actually having to invest in purchasing equipment. So that's something that a lot of our clients want to make use of, because it's very useful to actually explore different methods of processing before actually fully committing to one type of technology. Overall, I would say one of the key benefits really of working together with Camden on something like product reformulation is the variety of services that we provide all under one roof. So it's not just that our product innovation team is helping with the actual product development or provides guidance on this, but we also have the option to bring in expertise from other areas of the business. So this could be, for example, from our food safety experts. It could be from our microbiology team, chemistry team, or for example, from the regulatory affairs team, if there's any additional support needed in that area.
Lovely, thanks very much, Lucas, and having the opportunity to visit you in Chippen Camden last year, just phenomenal, just the breadth of experience and depth of experience that you have there. Question, I think probably for you, Susie, and again, we've touched on plant-based and the whole vegan rise and everything this morning. Could you outline for us what the main differences are in the plant-based approach? I mean, for example, the difference between plant-based versus whole food plant-based?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting, and it's an interesting question, and there's probably a bit of a spectrum of approaches here. So on the one hand, you've got kind of much more processed plant-based products, which you know, are much more kind of feel like they're developed in a factory, and they carry some disadvantages for consumers. So particularly considered to often be high in salt and quite artificial, compared to a more whole foods offering, which would have bigger advantages in terms of health and as part of a healthy diet. And I think particularly people like Tesco's with their Wicked Kitchen offering have tried to take these sort of elements of whole foods, but I think there's probably scope for both sets of products, but obviously with the kind of more artificial side of things, there's potentially a bit more margin as well. So it is something that a lot of manufacturers are looking into more.
Lovely, thank you. Michaela, if I can come back to you, because obviously on the whole plant-based side, I mean, Finnebrook have been really innovative in the plant-based arena as well. Do you think, Michaela, that the product trends for plant-based are going to continue to focus on recreating the meat experience, tastes like meat, looks like meat, smells like meat? Or do you think that the whole food approach is going to come more center stage on its own?
Thanks, Jeff. I think to Susie's point, actually, you know, both are important. You know, we see that I guess the likes of customers that call themselves and consider themselves as vegan and vegetarian are more likely to buy kind of whole foods, veg-based product, whereas actually the type of consumer that we largely try and target, and I think a lot of the new entrants into the market are also looking at, are those meat reducers. So they are more looking for products that do more closely imitate in terms of texture and taste and price, you know, their meat counterparts. If we just look at, I guess, some of the information, some of the growth, what we would in the industry bizarrely call analog products, which is the not veg-based products, account for 76% of meat-free. Now, obviously, go back a few years, that wouldn't have been quite the same. For a long time, corn with the microprotein have had that kind of the share of the market. But as I guess these meat reducers become more discerning and more, I guess, educated, they're looking for different sources of protein. And you know, we were talking about the differences in microprotein versus soy versus pea protein, and all of the other new proteins that are coming out there that give you different benefits, both texturally and nutritionally as well. So there's definitely a place for both to play a part. You know, we very much here at Finnebrook are hugely conscious about our responsibility, if you like, to make sure that, you know, we're targeting these people who want to reduce meat, but at the same time, we know they're concerned with 1 of 5 a day. We know they're concerned that they're going to continue to get the right level of nutrition, but ultimately we don't want it to taste you know, substandard. You know, it shouldn't be a compromise in terms of taste or nutrition, and it needs to be accessible as well. So, you know, price is really important across the whole board. So that would kind of count as our pillars really of development and how we like to develop our products.
Lovely, thanks, Michaela. Look, I was going to pull you in here now with a question, because I mean, for any of the companies that maybe have been listening in today and they've seen just the whole rise of veganism and that whole category, you know, probably fit, you know, sitting today, if they want to get into the category, where do they start? We know that Camden has decades of experience in terms of dairy, meat, cereals, all the rest. Does Camden BRI have expertise in the development of vegan or plant-based products?
Yes, we do actually. Unfortunately, a lot of the work that we do for our clients is confidential. So unfortunately, I can't give any concrete product examples, but we have helped many of our clients with product development work for a range of plant-based drinks, for example, a lot of bakery products, as well as meat replacements as well. In addition to this, we also have a couple of very exciting ongoing research projects that are related to plant-based or vegan products. One of this is a member-funded research project which investigates the functional properties of plant proteins. And another example of our ongoing research is a pre-competitive Egg-Free Research Club. That is a research club which is industrially funded, so the research results of this will be confidential, unfortunately, or luckily for the involved parties, as opposed to the member-funded research, which can be accessed by anyone who is a member of Camden. If there's any specific product that anyone who's listening has in mind, then I would suggest just getting in touch and we can discuss this a bit more specifically.
Lovely, thanks. Lucas, and certainly would encourage anybody who hasn't engaged with Camden before through our consumer insights team. We have a relationship with Camden, certainly to look at tapping into their expertise. Susie, if I can come back to you now, and just all the noise that is around plant-based at the moment. We heard your statistic earlier on this morning about 0.7% of the population actually being true vegans, if you like, and that's certainly a figure that we've heard from AHDB before, from Dave and from Steve. And really, the vegan category has been driven by flexitarians, probably like myself, who will never intend to be a true vegan. But looking at the meat and dairy sectors, what really has been the impact on the meat and the dairy sectors with the rise of the plant-based diets and the flexitarian diets?
Well, this is a question that we get asked a lot, actually, as you might imagine, and it's really tempting to see the very strong growth of plant-based and look at meat and dairy and say that one drives the other. But actually, in the UK, the effect of plant-based has been pretty minimal on meat and dairy, particularly. So if we look at markets going back for the last 5 years or so, there's been some slight erosion of volume in red meat, particularly driven by lamb, varies quite a bit by protein, beef to some extent, not actually a huge amount. And if you look at dairy, it's been pretty flat or slight growth in line with population. And some of the changes in the market have really been driven not by plant-based per se, but just changes in how we eat. So a lot of shifting from red meat into things like poultry. Also switch in how people consume meals from kind of more meat-centered meals. Traditionally, you know, your meat and two veg type dishes. Now it's more about, shall we have stir fry or pasta or curry, and meat or plant-based is very much interchangeable within those contexts. And people generally have had more interest in things like world cuisines, less time to cook. And generally things like, say, chicken breast or some corn mince or whatever, cook very quickly. But I think it's really interesting that how COVID in particular has changed things. It's really changed everything. And I shared some of the data in the presentation that red meat penetration really grew this year as plant-based penetration actually fell. And currently, meat and dairy volumes are actually really very buoyant, and we expect them to continue to be so as we enter the Christmas period. So it's still kind of a threat, and it's something that the meat and dairy industry certainly have their eye on. And markets like the US are more advanced. I think they've lost quite a bit within dairy. They've lost quite a bit of milk volume to alternatives in a way that isn't happening here in quite the same way. But really the biggest threat overall is remaining relevant to consumers and ensuring that meat and dairy products are marketed in a way that takes them above commoditisation. I think it's really interesting what Michaela's been talking about with Finnebrog, because there's a real role here for brands. The plant-based market is incredibly brand heavy, carry more interesting packaging and quite high advertising budgets as well, actually. So we need to really ensure as a meat and dairy industry that we remain relevant to consumers and drive meal inspiration in particular, and interest in the category at fixture, so consumers know, and reminding consumers how they can use those products in their diets.
Lovely, thanks Susie. Interesting just to see how COVID has changed that, and hopefully if you ever get past COVID, it'll be interesting to see just what the long-term impact is on dairy and meat as plant-based starts to rise. Danielle, going to come back to you with the question here, and you've probably introduced a new dimension from healthy diets this morning into sustainable healthy diets. Are shoppers for healthy products also more likely to shop for sustainable products?
I think it's an interesting question, Jeff, and I think ultimately, this is looking to the future in terms of where those consumer needs might go towards if we're to look at where kind of the scientific R&D is happening there. But it comes back to what Susie was saying there in terms of, you know, what's relevant to the customer ultimately. When we're talking about those, you know, will healthy diverge into sustainable healthy? I think it depends on what becomes most front of mind for the consumer. So you can say, you know, pure natural quality are keywords to describe what healthy is to some. It doesn't always, as a nutritionist, we can always leap to it's the nutrients, but there are lots of different aspects that consumers are interested in whenever they would say that they were looking for a healthy product. Now we can see with the rise in plant-based foods, albeit, you know, let's see where that comes out after COVID, with all of the differences in terms of cooking habits and things like that, which influence, I guess, another aspect of what people see as healthy foods, and, you know, preparation from you know, more raw ingredients can be an aspect of that as well, which does then link to sustainable healthy diets in terms of, you know, some of those ingredients that come into it. So, you know, in terms of where consumers see, I would say it might follow the trend where research is kind of combining all of those things together. So it's not that it's just healthy and then it's sustainable. It's trying to pull those things together as we consider the health of us as individuals, but also the health of the planet within that. And you know, but if it's to follow where the research is going, I think if that becomes more front and centre of people's mind, that those two things are linked, that's maybe what might come in the future.
Susie, did you want to come in there with some comments?
Yeah, we've at AHDB we've done quite an in-depth piece of consumer segmentation with Kantar World Panel, which looks at kind of the behaviour in terms of sales, but also the attitudes. And we've done this for meat, we've done it for dairy, and we've actually done a separate one for potatoes as well. But it's interesting that when we look at consumer groups, those two things of health and sustainability, and also animal welfare as well, often all of those three things tend to go hand in hand together, and the types of consumers who are most engaged with health are also the ones who are most engaged with sustainability as well. And it's very often driven by affluence, so the better off consumers are the ones who can afford to kind of be a bit more discerning about some of these decisions that they make. So I think it's important for businesses to really kind of consider how those different factors kind of interplay, because they are very tightly woven together from what we see.
Lovely, thank you. Danielle, a question just in. I'm probably going to come back to you on it. It strikes me that the production of vegan protein products involves a lot of processing. If these become more popular and mainstream, what are the possible environmental consequences of mass production? Danielle, do you want to kick off? And if anybody else wants to come in, feel free.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And ultimately, you know, there is a challenge in terms of a consistent way to compare and contrast what the environmental impact has been, alongside then what the potential nutritional benefits may or may not be. So not to kind of avoid the question, but I think from a research point of view, there needs to be a standardized way of looking at these things to really be able to objectively look to see and compare what the difference is across those productions and across the production of food, but also preparation of that food, and kind of how that food is distributed across the whole supply chain is also important consideration. So I think the answer is that it would be highly complex to look at it, but I think that's where a lot of the research is going to, is to try and standardize metrics that we can use to be able to compare the different production processes, to be able to understand that more, and for me to be able to fully answer that question.
Very lovely, thanks. Danielle. Michaela, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just really going to echo everything that that Danielle has just said, really. But there's a number of different elements, as you say, Danielle, to look at. And I think a lot of existing companies would just look at CO2 as an example. But I think the impact on the environment is a lot wider than that. And we know our consumers are really, really looking for, you know, I guess the information to be able to make those educated choices. You know, Danielle talks about supply chain, where you source the ingredients from, whether that's a red meat, you know, a fillet steak, or an avocado is really, really important, you know. And it's not all about meat versus veg. It's about that healthy balance, really. And I think that goes back to the nutrition in line with environmental sustainability as well. So it's a bit of a minefield, I think.
I think it certainly can be. Thanks, Michaela. One last question we have here, and I think we've time to fit it in okay. Daniela, I think maybe best to come back to you on it again around the area of sustainability. This area of research looking at the nutritional adequacy of sustainable diets is still very subjective. How can we make sure a level playing field for industry action in this area?
Yeah, I think that's a responsibility of people like myself who are doing research in this area. You know, as Michaela said, there are lots of different factors that come into how you would define the environmental impact as well as the nutritional impact of a food. There has been a huge amount of work, but it's currently being done separately. And I kind of mentioned this in the presentation, you know, as from a nutrition science point of view, I think, you know, we are getting there in terms of some of the metrics that exist to look at not just one nutrient, but look at lots of nutrients at one time in a food and extend that. You know, that's what's really exciting about some of the research that's coming out. It's about looking at combining all of the different elements that we know contribute to nutrition quality of a food with all of the different elements that are important when you're looking at the environmental impact of a food and bringing those two together, but importantly looking at it in a way that's contextualized to what people actually eat. And this is really, really important because, you know, to just rate a food product in and of itself is actually not what you would recommend from a kind of dietary improvement and lifestyle improvement point of view. It comes as a whole piece of your dietary pattern. And I think there is now work that is starting to look at that, to bring all of the different factors of nutrition science together with environmental science and start to apply that in the context of what people are really eating. And I think that's very important in terms of it will hopefully help to be able to guide food manufacturers to understand, okay, so in the context of dietary patterns, where are their potential impacts and how do they compare to others? Because without that, you know, how can you judge yourself versus others and any impact, positive or negative, that you might be having, and without a standardized approach to that? So I think there's a lot of work going on with that. I think fields are coming together now, and I would see that as something that will come out over the next number of years. You know, there's work done in Sweden already published. I think we need to look at it in terms of, you know, the UK market and other markets to look to understand in the context of our specific diets and those of different groups. So at the moment, a lot of the focus goes into, you know, those higher demographic groups, but we also know, you know, the sustainable healthy food should be accessible to all. So we have to look and understand how do we bring that in as well. So that's whereby those metrics will be really important to be able to answer some of those key questions that remain unanswered at the moment.
Lovely, thanks very much, Danielle. I think you're right. This is something that's going to play out over many years to come. That's our questions gone, and that's our time just about gone as well. So can I just say thanks to our presenters on our panel this morning, to Danielle, Susie, Michaela and Lucas, and indeed to all our presenters and contributors over the course of the week. I just take this opportunity to say thanks to our own Consumer Insights team here at Invest Northern Ireland, to Thelma, Nancy, Hannah and Sinead. Put a lot of work into starting to deliver this, and then we had COVID, and then we've gone to a digital delivery. So certainly thanks very much to all the work that they've done. I hope that we've given you some food for thought, if you forgive the pun, over the last 3 days. I just would say, please do engage with our Consumer Insights team. If you're an Invest NI client and you've had issues been raised over the last 3 days, please do contact Thelma or any of the team and help us to allow us to work with you in delivering that. Just want to say thanks very much for attending this morning. Don't forget, Thelma's on for just a roundup of all the different points from this week at 11:50. So you just need to click onto that screen at 11:50. But listen, thanks very much for attending this morning. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and good morning.